Welcome to another episode of Victoria's Lounge from Sankara Hotel. Now, recently, U.S. President Donald Trump made some rather derogatory remarks about Africa and Haiti. Now, for those who weren't very pleased, decided to lash out, some ignored it and dismissed it, while others decided to use it as a chance for introspection, to look at how we view ourselves as Africans and what we portray out to the world. So let's get that discussion started. But before we do, let's meet my guests. Steve Biko-Wafula is a legal professional with keen interests in finance and entrepreneurship, with over 8 years' experience in training, mentoring, building capacity, and engaging in entrepreneurial activities with the youth across Kenya. Shefa Okore is a program officer for civic engagement at Siasa Place, as well as content creator and editor. She counts herself as a feminist, digital activist expert, and social justice advocate. Professor Owor Olunga is an associate professor of anthropology and director at the Institute for Anthropology, Gender, and African Studies at the University of Nairobi. He is passionate about the role of culture in development as well as equity in the creation of opportunities. All right, so I don't think there's need to necessarily regurgitate what President Trump said. The world knows. But it is the premise of why we are having this discussion today. Let me begin with you, Professor Olunga. Did his comments hold any truth in your view?
I want to think that Trump was making reference not to me, but to my leadership. Not to African people, but to the leadership of Africa. And if you look at the kind of movement that Africans are dying in the Atlantic, Mediterranean Sea and everywhere else, trying to reach elsewhere, is basically because of failed leadership. So if you look at it critically, I thought the shithole that Trump meant is the leaders that steal from their people, leaders that cannot hold credible elections, leaders that have no recourse to justice, and we talk about peace minus justice. So I look at it from that perspective, and if that were the case, then I would agree with him that certain leaders need to rethink. And my view would be, it should then give us an impetus to even work harder to make our countries, one, occupiable, two, good for business, and three, inhabitable in a way that we don't move elsewhere, that we die en masse in the natural waters.
Shefa, do you feel that that was a veiled message to our leaders from Trump? I feel that's giving him too much credit, but what do you think?
African leaders generally are a shithole, right? Because you look at Burundi and what's been happening with Nkurunziza, you'd look at South Sudan and what Kiir has done with South Sudan. You'd look at Uganda, right? And we are still passing a law of there's no age limit, seriously. You look at Rwanda, we all praise Rwanda, but look at their political growth in regards to, they don't even have the ability to speak up when there's something wrong politically with their country, right? And then look at Kenya. We just went through a whole prolonged session of election that was unending just because people could not do the right thing. So I think the context in which Trump was speaking is what we need to define. I have no problem with him calling our leaders what he called them, and I want to believe that is what he was calling our leaders. Because Africa as a continent has really been the backbone of every other continent, right? When you look at America, when you look at Asia, when you look at South America, these people have grown because of Africa, right? And there's context in which that should have been, put in place, and that I think that is what he lacks. But of course, Trump is Trump, and he lacks the ability to even contextualize anything, right? So I think for us as Africans, there's a lot to think about or rethink. As leaders, there's some of us that need to be shamed, because you need to ask yourselves, how have you failed to make your people proud to be your people, right? And allow somebody to be able to call you that and walk away with it.
I mean, how much of this was leaders and how much of this was people in your estimation, Steve?
I think first and foremost, we need to understand the context under which Trump said these words. The discussions around immigration.
Right.
And the aspect of everyone else leaving their countries for America. And I think, why would I want to leave Kenya to go to America? I mean, seriously, why would I want? That means I'm looking for opportunity to grow. I'm looking to make more money. So once you put the words into the correct context, then you're able to understand what he actually meant and whether it was directed to us, the people, or to our leaders. And I think it was to both of us because one, if I'm faced with a situation, I can either walk away or deal with it. We've seen people die for lack of medicine. We've seen people die because of corruption, because of us doing wrong things, and we never really speak up. You know, we are sheep. We take what we're told like it's gospel truth. In the context of immigration, in the context of trying to protect his own country, well, his remarks are unfortunate, but I mean, with so much honest truth in them, I think it's making us get angry because we're letting a foreign person tell us the truth when it's not coming from our own people. When you compare Norway, which is actually 99% white people, and the rest of the other countries, his comments are racist. But unfortunately, Trump wants people who are good, people who can stand up, people who can actually advance an agenda for his own country. And I think we are wasting so much time focusing on the comments of shithole when we should be looking at the exact message that we're trying actually to pass across.
All right, and of course we'll be talking more about what those issues are. You raised an important point in terms of the people holding the leadership accountable. There's also a role we have to play as well, as opposed to always kind of blaming them for our woes. But let's take a look at what Kenyans on the street had to say about this.
I don't believe Kenya is a shithole. We've got like so many resources around our country, so whatever Trump was saying is not true.
The President of America will comment on something of which he doesn't really mean what he says.
Here in Kenya, we have what it takes to compete with any other country in the world.
I think it was an arrogant comment.
We are not headed in the right direction, not unless we get new political leaders.
All right, so I want to get, you know, the views of audience here in terms of what you thought of what he said. Was there truth to it? What are some of the things that, you know, we as Africans can indeed work on? There are things that we can improve so we don't kind of hold that kind of moniker.
In my own opinion, it was an insult to Africans. At the same time, it holds some element of truth. It's because, look at the resources. One of the things Trump said is because Africans, we fight for our resources. Look at what's happening in Sudan. They have oil, they're fighting. Go to Nigeria, people are fighting because of oil. We have leaders who embezzle with funds. So it can only be wrong if we continue fulfilling that prophecy of Trump.
If you look at Africa in early 90s, if you look at the head count of the poverty level, the Pacific and East Asia, they were having the half of the extreme poor people. But moving forward to 2013, now it's Africa that is having the half of the extreme poor. So how can you explain a continent where people are not moving forward, but we are moving backward? And the reason why this is happening is because we always want to wish away our problems. We don't want to deal with things. We always say, let's accept and move on. Let's pray that something will happen. But you know, the problem remains, it's constant. So I believe as Americans are making America great again, as Africans, we should talk of let's come back and build Africa. You know,
you raise a very interesting point in that we can be resilient to a fault. I mean, it can really mess us up where we don't correct the wrongs in our society. And Prof, I'd really want to get your take on this in terms of that allows an inferiority complex to set in a lot of times. So you allow someone else to now speak into your situation and define you because you haven't necessarily found and seen your own value and build from there.
I think let me start by quoting Francis Allen. He said that the rarest ability in the world is the ability to recognize ability. A lot of times we don't know what we are capable of doing. And the lack of incapacity to accept or to acknowledge what we are capable of doing is also a construct of our socialization. I always think that everybody can live in a logical framework approach where you have objectives, activities, and input and outputs. And when you see that you're not going to the direction you'd want to be, then you could be able to change course. What we are accustomed to, one, is that from independence, we thought that there were things that the government was supposed to be doing for us. Unfortunately, it has done none. Disease, ignorance, poverty, and as the lady says here, you find that at independence probably we were better off than most of the countries. We are now regressing. Mandela is a hero, yes, he was. As to whether he was able to deal with the disparities in wealth, I'm not too sure. We've had changes in Zimbabwe. The most important thing is, I like what Steve said, let us have some kind of a demanding citizenry. Let's be able to question what's not right and accept where mistakes are. We have been, pigeonholed together in terms of ethnic entities, so that if I question the leadership, who is he, Olunga? Where does he come from? Come from this. He hates our people. So that somebody on the streets called Kamau hates me just because I'm questioning the leadership. So he becomes part of the problem because he also does not know that things are not right. So that inferiority complex comes into play because we have isms, ethnism, sexism, all these kind of isms that in reality then divides us for the sake of the politician to continue amassing wealth at our expense. So these are the things we need to look at critically.
It's interesting because that's the same tactic the colonials used when it came to divide and rule. We're doing it among ourselves. We didn't even need their help now moving forward. Take a look at this.
Trump's insult was not just directed against African leaders. It was also directed against black people. A lot of Africans believe that propaganda, that we are inferior, others are superior. So we can be called in any name by those whom we consider to be superior to us. Our problem is the problem of leadership. We don't have leaders who will want to protect us economically or politically or socially. Our leaders will quite easily put us, under the bus. They don't care about us. And unless we change our leaders, I don't think that we will be in a position to liberate ourselves in terms of image.
And on that note, let's take a short break. We continue this conversation. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. You're watching Victoria's Lounge. We're talking about how we as Africans view ourselves in light of what was said recently by the U.S. president. And Schaefer, I still want to stick on that whole issue of mentality, because it's huge. We keep talking about this whole thing of mental slavery. We can blame the colonialists, we can blame our leaders, but we need to kind of do some introspection and see, are we so focused on the negative history of us as a people that we can't see our potential to move forward?
I think the thing is how we are focused on the negative history. African history generally is very dark and full of, dead bodies unaccounted for and people who've never paid reparations for that. The problem we do is we don't learn anything from that at all. We understand that we've come from this broken historical injustices that have culminated to us being here the way we are. Right? As divided people, not even just in Kenya, but as divided people as a continent. Look at even Africa, when you try to travel within the continent alone, it's difficult. But in European states, you travel so easily. Amongst ourselves, we don't just want to think that we deserve better. Amongst ourselves and for our continent. So it is how we are perceiving our history and how we are letting that manifest. It's like we constantly focus on the negative and we just want to act negatively, instead of seeing that we have come from this place where there was so much hurt, there was so much pain, there was so much division. It is about time we united. It is about time we created a space where we can all thrive as Africans, right? It is about time we all traded amongst ourselves, intra-Africa trade, because I don't understand how we even imagine that we would need to go anywhere else. We need to start understanding that nobody will develop Africa, nobody will develop Kenya, only Kenyans and only Africans. I think that's, I repeat, let's just be in a corner and all be shaken to some sense. We need that, seriously.
Yeah, and that goes to your point, Steve, in terms of having a proactive, vocal citizenry to hold the leadership to account and to demand for the livelihoods that we do want and deserve. And I'm thinking, here we are talking, and it's great to have exposed, educated, woke Africans knowing what they want, but still we represent a small percentage of most. The reality is a lot more Africans are living below poverty line. And, you know, it's like they're overtaken by what I like to call the vicissitudes of life. Too much that you don't even care about changing your situation.
I have a question. When your father insults you or your neighbor insults you, which one stings more? Which one makes you pay attention to what is being said, your neighbor or your father? You see, as Kenyans, we are shithole. One, because we're given money for aid to do research, treat HIV, buy medicine. We steal the money. As in, we steal money meant for our sick people, our own relatives, but we don't say anything. Yeah? We have MCAs fighting, beating each other up. We clap, we applaud them. We have people dying on our roads every single day. But because it's not my relative, you know, I really don't care. I don't demand better. We install cameras worth billions. When someone dies, the cameras don't work. And we say, oh, you know, we deserve to be insulted. And I think we need to be insulted until we wake up. Because at the end of the day, what country are we living for our children? Trump has the audacity to speak the way he speaks because he knows he's on signing the checks for aid. Trump knows he's a sole person who will later determine whether the money comes or not. So if you're a beggar, you can be insulted because you know you're still going to pass your ball like this and expect for more. I mean, when key leaders get sick, they spend millions and millions. When the late governor died, he actually died on the road. There was no road patrol, no road emergency rescue. I mean, devolution was supposed to work. We're supposed to have better healthcare. I mean, how much is being pumped into healthcare to devolution? I mean, let us not pretend that Trump is actually insulting us. He's actually telling us the truth. So ask yourself, when your father insults you or your neighbor insults you, which one stings more?
Let me ask this to the audience, because, and you're right, Steve, this has been said for decades about Africa. We just happen to have social media and, you know, people who can rant and draw attention to it. But this has been said and thought about Africa for years. So what is it going to take for us to actually change our circumstances or care enough to change our circumstances? I just want to open up to the audience.
I think for myself personally, though Kenya and Africa as a whole is a shithole, I want to grow in Africa. I want to better myself in Africa. Like Sauti Sol said, there's no other place I'd rather be but in Africa. It's a shithole, but I myself am the one who will work so that I make sure that I make Africa a better place. It starts with you and me.
As a person who would like to contest in the years to come, who is my mentor? My mentor is, of course, a leader who is in a position right now. And most of those leaders we've elected, first of all, hey, they seriously have issues. Number one, they can't account for funds they've been given in our county government. Right. Look at the system of offering tenders in the county. It is seriously, who do you know? And if I don't know nobody, I can't be given a tender. I believe Trump did not really want to say that Africa's, because I'm proudly African, seriously. Because for me as a Kenyan, I would rather stay here than go abroad there. Fine, it's good to explore, but I think being African is one thing that I'm so proud about.
We need civic education. 1 year to election is not enough for us to do civic education for Kenyans. Those civic educators, let them come out right now. Let's go to Mashinani. Let's educate our young people. Let's empower them. And empowering them is not by just giving them jobs. Empowering them is by educating them in such a way that they can open up their minds and be able to decide for themselves. So even at this time, someone like Victoria Rubadiri, I mean, you can do a peaceful campaign, run for governor, and you can make it right. I mean, they are the learned people in the society. The learned people, you see her face, you see her face. It means that our leadership is...
It is.
Our leadership is going, the learned people do not want to be associated with it. Look at Igathe, look at Rosalind Akombe. Let's not forget all these beautiful people who can do so much, but now they lack patriotism. Maybe they're not really motivated. It's not always about the money. We need to come out and ask the hard questions, as Dr. Harry said. We need to be accountable right from the small spaces for us to scale to the higher levels.
So one thing I really like that you said, and we'll talk about in part 3 of the show, is for those who know, to sow into those that don't. That needs to start happening, even in terms of civic education, mentorship, taking time out of your day. And you're right, I'll take your challenge, however, not entering politics. I'm very averse to politics. And Professor actually will explain why that happens. But let's take a short break here on Victoria's Lounge. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. You're watching Victoria's Lounge. I wish you could be here during the breaks because the conversation really does start then. We want to now start talking about solutions because, yes, we've talked about the negative comments made, the mentality we have towards ourselves. And now let's talk about how we can change the situation and change our circumstances and look at the bright spots in Africa. Many of the audience members said, it is worth me staying here on the continent. Why? Let's take a look at what Dr. Wale Akinyemi had to say about that. Take a look at this.
There was a particular year, 70,000 Africans emigrated from Africa to Europe and North America. Now, that same year, African organizations hired 100,000 expatriates. Now, look at that. Wow. 70,000 Africans are going out there and they're going to be paid peanuts. 100,000 expatriates are hired here and paid higher than the African will ever be paid here. Won't it have been easier for us to just celebrate our own?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that is one campaign I want. Let's celebrate our own.
All right, so talking about the importance of seeing our value, that is part of the solution, getting us out of where we are now. And Prof, I want to engage you on that in terms of some of the opportunities we can start taking advantage of here in Africa. Why is it a place where the world now is looking in? Their eyes are turned toward the continent for a reason. They're seeing things happening here now that Africans, up until now, were wondering, why are they here? Yes. Why are they coming to Africa?
Absolutely. I think let me again start by quoting Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, nobody will make you inferior without your consent. And let me give an example. A very rich Kenyan went for kidney dialysis in South Africa. And when he reached the hospital, he was asked whether he wanted an international doctor or a local one in South Africa. He said he wanted an international one. And then Professor Mark Ligeo was flown in from Kenya. He's a Kenyan in South Africa. Then Professor Mark Ligeo is flown in from Kenya. And then Professor introduces himself to the patient. I'm Professor Mark Ligeo. I'm a doctor in Kenya teaching at the University of Nairobi. He said, oh my God. So you are the international consultant I've been. So when the guy was treated, he offered to give a present to Mark Ligeo. So the question is, did he know that Mark existed? Or was Mark from different extraction than him and therefore not consultable? In this country, as a student of culture, culturally, we have things that people are capable of doing. We know what Luos can do. We know what Kambas are good at. We know what a Kikuyu can do. And all these things are based on either geographical variation and everything else. Meaning, number one, we must be able to celebrate our diversity. The diversity is not wrong. If Kenyans were like Rwanda, would have gone to war a long time. But the diversity is making sure that does not happen. So this diversity must be celebrated. Secondly, we must rethink our education system. Not everybody can get an A to be a professor in a university. An MCA here earns more money. Is actually better Oworo Lunga to resign from being a university professor to be an MCA. So you have a country that gives more money to an MCA for making noise on the street than a professor in the university. But again, we must ask those professors in the university, what kind of mentorship are they having to our youngsters? So it's not just a question of being a professor. what value addition. So we also must have an education system that creates room for talent growth. We must have an education system where a D person is not forced to go to university because that's not what he or she wanted. Talent academy, football is paying. I don't think any president in the world would ever earn more money as Messi did. What is Messi's qualification? The other day we were celebrating Michael Olunga for scoring the first hat-trick for Girona as a team. How much is he earning from that? If this country can be able to have pickpockets of talent academies in football, in all manners of other, in athletics and all this kind, will be cool. What is the possibility of engendering our politics? What would be wrong by having a president, a man, the deputy, a woman, so that we de-ethnicize politics? If Uhuru Kenyatta, for instance, had Chef as a runmate, maybe would not have a country where it's Kikuyu Kalenjin, would have a country where other values are brought on board. So that we again start revolutionizing our politics from within, so that ethnicity is not the cornerstone of everything. Wow. How about just thinking, what is it that you can do to yourself? What I want to tell you, Victoria, is this. Individuals have residual capacity to make a difference. That difference, a lot of time, can only be in action. I hate it when I see students who think that being the university alone is enough. I hate to see parents who think that the educated daughters and sons know more than them. So the advice comes other way around. So some of these things, we need to balance them. We need to question. We also need to be proud of ourselves and to work and be given equal pay for that work, whether it's women, the youth, men, or anybody. But we must also cherish diversity in our government, in the appointment of the cabinet, in everywhere. Right now, ERC has increased the price of fuel. What's the justification? If the international price of the same is not even rising. But here, somebody's telling you, oh, we need money. Electricity bills are now being inflated. Guys, these are the conversations we must ask. Who has ever even rioted and left the car at home? The increase of fuel this time around was not right. We are not driving to work. We'll walk. They will actually see sense. How do you come to terms with Nigeria having no fuel?
Imagine the bedrock.
Can you imagine?
Fuel. Yeah.
We've now been told the water in Turkana can serve us for 70 years. What's happening with processing it? Anyway.
Tough questions you're asking. We can talk and talk. Absolutely, Prof. Some really enlightening insights. Yes, Steve.
Kenyans don't like such conversations. We find such conversations very boring. I mean, I think it's taken words out of my mind. We deserve everything we're getting. We deserve to die. We deserve to get sick. Until the day we'll say, you know what, enough is enough. Our kids deserve to fail. Until we wake up and say, you know what, enough is enough. We deserve to pay triple the electricity bills until people can say, you know what, we're all switching off. And then we see what Kenya Power will do. You know, unga now, a 2 kg unga ugali is 200 shillings. Seriously. We deserve everything we get until the day we'll say enough is enough.
And Chief, I want to kind of get your take on this in terms of moving forward. And, you know, Steve mentioned the whole thing of we need to look at ourselves, start with ourselves. Because Prof mentioned mentorship, value addition, capacity building. For those who have the knowledge, how do we start that journey of empowering the struggling masses? Because that's also where we begin to see the value addition happening among the masses.
Yeah. I think the one thing that always scares anybody who is in the know, who has basic information about just even accountability and what needs to be done and where you need to ask questions and who you need to ask questions, is the fact that we look at change in that level as I need to be in a room of 1,000 people to pass my message across. But yet in your households, even the people who work within your household, you've not started this conversation with them. Even with your own children, the knowledge, the influence you have on them is completely the opposite of that. If all of us just decided amongst our spheres, because that's what I do, that's my agenda, within my spheres, within the people I am able to reach and are able to reach me, this is what you need to know about this country. That there's a mentality of extractivism that has been used not just in Kenya, but in the entire continent. We've extracted our raw materials, we've extracted labor, we've extracted skill. Anybody who is good in Africa should go abroad, right? And then we talk of brain drain. because now we don't have anybody here. That same mentality is what we're employing in our own homes, where we will shield any child or anybody we come into contact with, even relatives. We avoid talking about political issues, heavy issues, honest conversations, and that's the thing that Kenyans don't want. Kenyans don't want a finger to be pointed at them and to be told, I am sorry. You have failed this country, and this is how you have failed this country. By knowing ABCD and keeping quiet with it, or keeping quiet of it, and not sharing it with anybody, within your local spheres alone, in universities, in spaces where you work, in social spaces where you have your wine with your friends, in spaces where I don't know what slay queens are, but wherever they are, these slay queens, if they can talk about even the level of tax in which makeup is being taxed. That is a conversation, right? If we can talk about the fact that not all of us will be able to afford to look as beautiful and glamorous as you are, because it's heavy in regards to money, and it shouldn't be, right? Because we have local Kenyans who are doing amazing in that industry of just cosmetics alone to be able to provide affordable quality options, but we don't, right? So what are we doing in our spaces? Before you talk about, I want to go on air and talk about these things, in your house, what do people know about this country? Your mama mboga, does she know that she's selling 3 leaves of skuma wiki or 3 leaves of spinach because somebody got an accident at Salga, or now we can't transport these things at night because the government has come up with the genius plan of let's ban transport at night. So now she's increasing the price because she's also trying to beat the fact that skuma wiki and spinach gets spoiled overnight, right? So now you're buying 3 leaves at maybe 7 shillings. And it is these small things that when you start raising awareness about, we all have something that we are saying towards ensuring that the country has accountability. It doesn't have to be big things. Sometimes I always say, you don't even have to run for office. What you have to do is become a vigilant citizen in this country, because this country takes so much from you. It has taken, surely, like you said, we deserve unemployment, we deserve to die of hunger, we deserve to die of malaria, we deserve all this, we deserve to die in the roads. Until the day when we realize, oh, it's only 2 Kenyans who are left, okay, then let's fix our country, even if it is just you 2. Because clearly, we are not getting it. We don't want to start with ourselves, because the idea of also collective responsibility does not make sense to us. We don't understand how someone like me has to be responsible about the area I live. There are potholes in town, CBD, Nairobi, yes. But there are potholes right where I live. So I'm finding it better complaining about potholes in CBD because it's easier to point a finger at Sonko fix it. But not at me where I am down there looking for my MCA. Excuse me, sir or madam, what are you doing about these ones here, right? So it's easier for us to far-fetch blame than to start from where we are. So there are things that Kenyans need to do. We have to realize our responsibility as citizens. I'm just tired of saying it, but somehow I feel like I need to constantly say it. Yeah. Nobody is coming. There are people who talk about Jesus is tired by the Jesus went somewhere else, he's chilling. Because he has given you the knowledge. He ensured that we have a new constitution. He ensured you're no longer under colonialism, but you refuse to think. You refuse to ask your leader, where? Anybody who was promised anything right now, have you asked your MCA? I don't even want to talk governor. Governors are special. MCA, the person you can go next door and find his office next to your house. Have you even gone and asked him what is happening with garbage? So he can elevate this conversation, right? Have we even asked them what is happening with water? I traveled some time back in Mbita. The lake is beautiful. It is blue and green and all sorts of magnificence, right? But people don't have drinking water. But this is a lake, right? But we don't have drinking water. Freshwater lake. People don't have drinking water. Then when you elevate these conversations to leadership, they tell you, go back to Nairobi where Sonko has his deputy has dropped out. I'm like, wow.
When it comes to the stories we tell of ourselves now, because now we have social media, an individual has become a media house and can broadcast news about their locale to the world. What stories are we telling? I remember listening to a comment from Akon, and he was saying we need to rebrand ourselves as Africans, and the kinds of stories that we're telling. Media was so quick ourselves to tell negative stories as opposed to looking at what you're saying, the bright spots or the serious issues that are affecting the continent. How do we change the narrative?
I come from Webuye. I'm very proud of Webuye. I think I've made it very clear. When I travel the world, I make sure that people like come from Ubuye. It's what we tell the world about ourselves that gives us the hope. The unfortunate bit about our media is that we are focused on, I mean, if you ask me what is the positive things about Kenya, I'll have to think hard to tell you, because we focus so much on negativity. You know, anything from Western is about cooks and watchmen. I've taken it upon myself for the last 5 years to rebrand, to tell the story that we are better people, that we are proud Luyas, that we can connect with Kikuyus and Luos and everyone else. I mean, I'm watching a series called The Designated Survivor, and in the series whereby the president who was the designated survivor talks to one of the journalists and tells him, you can choose to highlight my weaknesses right now and make us weaker to our enemies, or you can hold on to the right time for you to tell the story. And I think the most powerful man in the world is a man who can tell a story, because you will redefine how people perceive you people. And I think I'm glad to be here on this show, to be able to encourage others who are on social media to tell their stories. Whether you have 1 follower, 2 people, tell your story. Take a picture of where you come from. Be proud of who you are. And say you're proud of other communities too. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's the stories we tell that define who we are. At the end of the day, we will be remembered for the stories we told. I'm able to tell, I know about Kikuyus and Luos and Kambas, not because I've been there, but because of what I've read. And if we're not able to travel, then we're able to read to understand. And we can only read what has been written in a beautiful way. The most powerful man is one who can tell a story about where it comes from.
As Africans, we have the human resources that we've talked about. For example, we know that the US was built by the people from Liberia. Why didn't they build their own country? And we talk of good doctors and good actresses and the best lecturers from Africa in the US, and they're saying they're building the US. Why are they building the US and they're not building their countries? So the first thing we need to do is our people who are out there and saying they're building those other countries that don't want them, actually, they don't appreciate you. Bring back your skills to your countries. Bring back your skills to your continent. And we talk of people who are out of the country. We have people in our countries who are not in touch with the ground. They don't know what is happening. They don't know that there are people who sit on the floor to learn in schools, and not cemented floor, but it's dust. They don't know that there are so many women who are dying giving birth. They're actually dying giving lives. They don't know that people are dying of malaria, of all the diseases in Kenya. So we need to be in touch with the ground. We need to know what is really happening in our country. Let's not just watch the TVs and go to the malls and not know what is really happening down there to our countries and what we can do.
All right, great. Absolutely. And we definitely need to hold the powers that be to account, especially moving forward. Thank you so much to my panel, Professor Olunga Schaefer, Steve, and audience as well. This has been amazing. I hope it stirs up conversations in homes, in schools, and across our society to really do that introspection. What can we do? Change our minds first. That's the biggest thing we need to do. For those that do know, sow back into those that don't. Empower your fellow brothers and sisters. And then most importantly, control the narrative, take it back, and tell the stories that matter to the world so they can appreciate us for who we are. Thanks for watching. Thank you to Sankara Hotel for hosting us. Hey, let's do this again next week. Have a wonderful evening.